Most philosophies try to teach you how to be happy. Buddhism did something much more disturbing. It performed an autopsy on your prison while you were still locked inside it. What you call your life is, in fact, a blind mechanism of repetition that converts raw reality into daily suffering. The 12 gears of existence are not spiritual poetry. They are the technical blueprint of a corrupted algorithm. If you feel that life is a succession of automatic reactions, you are right. You are not the master of your destiny. You are the fuel for a machine you never learned to operate. The diagnosis is dry. You have been living as a walking corpse, reacting to impulses you do not even know the origin of. This is not content designed for your comfort. There's no promise of ephemeral peace, no guarantee of relief, and certainly no spiritual anesthesia. What the conscious elite seeks here is raw realism. If you came looking for something to make you feel better, you are in the wrong place. But if you came to understand why you suffer, not philosophically, but mechanically, prepare for the training. The map we are going to dismantle removes all your excuses and hands you the total weight of mental sovereignty. The problem was never the world, your circumstances, or your bad luck. The problem is that your mind is a system operating in a loop, and you have been merely the slave to your own reactions. For the operator of lucidity, understanding the 12 gears is the first step toward breaking ties with inertia. We're going to perform the autopsy of your system now. If you have the necessary rigor to face your own gears, you can finally stop being the part and start being the owner of the workshop. The training begins with the destruction of your first illusion. The first gear is not a lack of culture or intellect, but a system error in the basic perception of reality. The walking dead operate under the illusion that things are permanent and that the I is a solid entity. This is the fundamental blind spot. You are trying to navigate fluid territory using a concrete map. Under hard lucidity, ignorance is the veil that prevents you from seeing the impersonal and shifting nature of all phenomena. In the anatomy of this mechanism, ignorance functions as the corrupted base software that distorts all input data. It makes you believe that satisfaction can be found in external objects, generating an infinite search for something that cannot be retained. It is the root of all friction in the system. As long as you do not see reality as it is, every move you make will be a step deeper in the direction of automatic suffering. The training of the conscious elite begins with the clinical discernment that your current vision is clouded. The operator of lucidity does not seek to learn more things, but rather to delete false certainties. The protocol requires you to question the solidity of every personal drama. Is this real, or is it just gear 1 distorting the facts? The truth is not comfortable, but it is the only thing that interrupts the initial torque of the suffering machine. The second gear represents the inertia of your mental hardware, blind impulses and habitual tendencies. These are the conditioned tracks through which your energy flows without your conscious consent. Every automatic reaction of anger, fear, or desire is an impulse that gains speed before you even noticed. You are not free. You are merely the result of repetition patterns that the mechanism has accumulated for years. These formations are like scars on the fabric of the mind that dictate the direction of your will. They transform the present into a repetition of the past. The walking dead believe they are choosing, but they are merely executing pre-installed scripts of biological reactivity. It is the weight of this inertia that makes change so difficult. The system is addicted to reacting in the same way, creating a predictable destiny of mediocrity and pain. To achieve mental sovereignty, you must become the master of intention. Operational rigor consists of observing the impulse arising, the urge to complain, to procrastinate, or to validate oneself, and refusing to give it strength. The protocol here is the deliberate interruption of habit. By not reacting according to the tracks of the sankharas, you begin to break ties with inertia and regain technical command over your own will. The third gear is the emergence of discriminative consciousness, the moment when the system begins to fragment reality. Here the mind divides the continuous flow of existence between subject and object. For the walking dead, this consciousness is not a space of clarity, but a reactive radar that constantly searches for threats or opportunities for the ego, keeping the hardware in a state of constant alert and tension. Anatomically, this consciousness functions as the central processor that sustains the illusion of separation. It does not observe reality equanimously. It filters data through fear and desire, creating an I that feels isolated and in conflict with the world. It is a fragmented consciousness that generates the mental noise necessary to sustain the inauthentic identity, preventing access to pure discernment. The operator of lucidity trains to stabilize this consciousness. The goal is to transition from reactive consciousness to sovereign consciousness. The protocol requires you to observe the act of perceiving. Do not get lost in what you are seeing or hearing, but recognize the space where the perception happens happens. By anchoring yourself in dispassionate observation, you withdraw the power of Gear 3 to create unnecessary divisions and conflicts in your system. The fourth gear is where the illusion gains a body and a label. It is the process of translating raw reality into digestible concepts for the ego. The walking dead do not interact with the real world. They interact with the labels that their mind sticks onto every object, person, or event. This is the birth of the inauthentic identity. You confuse the physical form and the conceptual name with the essence of things, getting lost in a world of projections. In the anatomy of this gear, the system functions like a packaging factory. It takes pure experience and packages it into rigid definitions. This is good, this is me, this is a failure. This labeling creates a barrier between the operator of lucidity and factual reality, forcing the hardware to process symbols instead of facts. You become a slave to definitions that you yourself created, defending concepts as if they were your own life. The training of the conscious elite focuses on the deconstruction of mental language. Discernment demands that you see the form without letting yourself be hypnotized by the name. The protocol consists of observing an object or emotion and removing its label. Feel the energy of anger without calling it my anger. See the task without calling it difficult. By breaking ties with definitions, you prevent Gear 4 from solidifying the illusion and keep the system fluid and open to hard lucidity. The fifth gear represents the antennas of your hardware: the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and the processing mind. For the walking dead, these bases are critical vulnerabilities. They are wide open and unguarded, allowing the noise of the world to invade the system and dictate the direction of attention. You do not use your senses as tools. You are used by them to maintain a state of distraction and a search for constant stimuli. Anatomically, these bases are purely mechanical data terminals, but the lack of mental sovereignty transforms them into hooks. Mechanism is addicted to new data to avoid the silence of consciousness, creating a sensory dependency that keeps you hostage to the external environment. If a sound arises, you react. If an image appears, you get lost. The hardware is configured to be hijacked by any fluctuation in the input terminals. The operator of lucidity applies the protocol of guarding the gates. Operational rigor does not consist of nullifying the senses, but of establishing a filter of discernment at the entrance. By observing the sense operating, the eye seeing, the ear hearing, you create a technical separation between the stimulus and the processing. The goal is to ensure that the information reaches the system without your identity being dragged along by it, keeping sovereign consciousness in command of the antennas. The sixth gear is the point of impact, the millisecond in which the raw data hits the sensory organs. Under hard lucidity, contact is merely an electrical transfer of information, light touching the retina, pressure on the skin. However, in a system without rigor, contact is the trigger for an emotional explosion. The walking dead do not perceive the distinction between touch and pain. For them, the impact and the reaction are a single, indivisible event. Contact is where factual reality and your internal software collide. It is a high-speed gear that operates below the radar of common consciousness. For the reactive mechanism, contact is interpreted as an invasion or a promise, immediately initiating the torque that will move all the following gears of desire and suffering. It is in this phase that your peace is stolen by external factors, because your hardware does not know how to process the impact without generating friction. The conscious elite trains to isolate the phenomenon of contact. The goal is to feel the collision, whether a harsh word or a physical touch, and recognize it only as a technical event. There was contact. The protocol requires you to position yourself at the exact moment of impact and prevent the energy from shifting toward judgment. By mastering Gear 6, you create a buffer of lucidity that protects the integrity of your system, preventing external pressure from transforming into internal suffering. The seventh gear is the turning point where the walking dead lose their sovereignty. As soon as contact occurs, the mechanism classifies the experience as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. Under hard lucidity, sensation is merely an electrical signal, technical feedback from the hardware. However, you have been programmed to treat this signal as a matter of survival, becoming a slave to how your nerve terminals are firing at each moment. The anatomy of this gear reveals the basis of all your lack of freedom. If the sensation is pleasant, your system becomes instantly addicted. If it is painful, it enters a state of war. The problem is not the sensation itself, but the absolute importance you attribute to it. You live in a constant, predictable, and manipulable fluctuation, because your actions are dictated by the incessant search for relief relief, or the frantic flight from discomfort. The training of the conscious elite focuses entirely here. Gear 7 is the battlefield where you interrupt the machine's torques. The protocol consists of observing the sensation as an impersonal phenomenon. There is a signal of discomfort instead of I am suffering. By maintaining the rigor of not classifying the sensation as an emotional event, you prevent the energy from moving to the next gear, keeping your sovereign consciousness intact in the face of chemical fluctuation. The 8th gear, thirst, is the engine of your biological reactivity. The moment a sensation is classified, the mechanism triggers a visceral impulse, an insatiable thirst to repeat pleasure or to annihilate pain. For the walking dead, this desire is not a choice, it is an order. You do not feel desire, you are the fuel of desire, being dragged by a gravitational force seeking a relief that is never permanent. Anatomically, thirst is a corrupted feedback loop that feeds on its own dissatisfaction. The more you try to satiate this impulse, the more the system convinces itself that it needs external stimuli to be in balance. It is a thirst that never ends, because the object of desire is merely an excuse. What the mechanism wants is the end of the tension it created itself. You become a beggar of sensations, dependent on conditions you do not control. The operator of lucidity attacks this gear through the rigor of non-action. The protocol requires you to feel the fever of desire, the electrical impulse to grab or flee, and refuse to provide it with movement. You observe the thirst as a chemical fluctuation in the hardware, without granting it narrative authority. By not feeding the thirst with reactivity, the loop of Tana loses pressure, and your mental sovereignty begins to be restored over biological impulses. The 9th gear is the crystallization of thirst, the moment the hand closes over the object. If thirst is the impulse, attachment is the possession. Here, the walking dead builds their identity around what they have or what they think. You do not just have ideas, you are your ideas. Attachment transforms fluid reality into a rigid and heavy structure, creating an armor of dogmas and preferences that keeps you isolated in raw realism. The systemic danger of this gear is that it creates a false security that drowns you in anxiety. The more you attach to things, people, or concepts to define who you are, the more vulnerable your system becomes to impermanence. The ego becomes a house of cards built on what is unstable. Attachment is the phase where the mechanism becomes possessive, transforming the flow of life into a static prison of mind and I. To break ties in this gear, the operator must practice surgical detachment. Discernment requires recognizing that everything you hold, in truth, holds you back. The protocol of the conscious elite is to keep the hands open, use the resources, live the experiences, but never allow the system to confuse what you use with your essence. Rigor is knowing that the utility of something ends at the exact moment you try to make it permanent. The 10th gear is the combustion process where your attachments transform into an active identity. In raw realism, becoming is the potential energy of your next reaction. It is the invisible script you wrote with past desires, and that now dictates who you must be to feel safe. The walking dead is not just in the world. He is constantly becoming something, a victim, a hero, an addict, losing the capacity to be just the consciousness that observes. Anatomically, becoming functions like accumulated pressure in a hydraulic system. The mechanism generates constant tension to keep your self-image alive, consuming a massive amount of energy to sustain a character that does not exist outside your mind. It is the moment the mind decides, I need to act in way X to validate myself. If you are always trying to become something, you are never the master of the now. You are only the slave of your next projected version. The operator of lucidity acts here through the interruption of the narrative. The protocol requires you to execute the tasks of the day without allowing the system to create an identity around them. Breaking ties with becoming means acting without the need to be someone special or to reach an ideal state. When you give up on becoming, you finally begin to be, reclaiming mental sovereignty over the present moment and deactivating the seed of the next cycle of pain. The 11th gear is the concrete manifestation of a new cycle of suffering. It is not just about biological birth, but the arising of any situation, project, or mental state born from your attachment. The walking dead celebrates the birth of new ambitions and identities without realizing that. In the system of dukkha, everything that is born brings with it the obligation of conflict and defense. You gave life to a new problem while believing you were giving life to a new solution. In this phase, the illusion becomes factual reality for the ego. Birth is the proof that the mechanism has completed its work. It has transformed an abstract impulse into a real situation that you now have to manage. The anatomy of this gear reveals a state of absolute vulnerability. Once something is born in your mind or your life, the hardware immediately enters protection mode, generating anxiety and fear that this new creation might be threatened or destroyed. For the conscious elite, birth is observed with dispassionate equanimity. The protocol consists of not letting yourself be seduced by the new. Rigor requires you to recognize that everything born from biological reactivity is destined to fail. By maintaining hard lucidity over the emergence of new impulses, you do not identify with the creation, remaining as the sovereign observer who is unaffected by the beginning or the end of the ego's constructions. The 12th gear is the final verdict of the existential hardware. Everything that is born must, by mechanical law, undergo erosion, decay, and dissolution. Old age and death are not personal tragedies. They are the fundamental properties of any composite system. Suffering becomes unbearable for the walking dead because they spent the previous 11 gears trying to build something permanent, fighting against the inevitable flow of raw realism. The anatomy of this gear reveals the inevitable collapse of the entire structure of attachment. When factual reality topples what you tried to hold on to, the mechanism produces lamentation, pain, and despair. The loop closes here. The shock of loss generates a new wave of ignorance, gear 1, restarting the engine of suffering. Without proper training, the death of one illusion is merely the fertilizer for the next, keeping you trapped in an infinite cycle of agony and useless reconstruction. The operator of lucidity uses death as their greatest tool for liberation. The protocol is the daily contemplation of dissolution, except that everything you have is already in the process of leaving. When you stop fighting against impermanence, the mechanism loses its capacity to generate fear. Mental sovereignty reaches its peak when you realize that what dies is only the inauthentic character, leaving sovereign consciousness free from the burden of trying to immortalize what is by nature ephemeral. Understanding the 12 gears is not an exercise in intellectual curiosity. It is a declaration of war against your own inertia. The mechanism of suffering operates in the dark, feeding on your distraction and your lack of rigor. Now that you possess the technical map of your prison, ignorance has ceased to be an accident and has become a conscious choice. If you continue to react to the senses and pursue the thirst for relief, you are actively choosing to remain as the walking dead, spinning in infinite loops of dukkha. Mental sovereignty is not achieved through prayers or positive thinking, but through direct intervention in the hardware of consciousness. Gear 7, sensation, is your ultimate battlefield. It is there, in the vacuum between feeling and reacting, that the operator of lucidity exercises their power of veto. If you can observe the electrical signal of pleasure or pain without becoming a slave to desire, you withdraw the torque from the entire system. Freedom is not the absence of gears, but the technical capacity to not be moved by them. Raw realism teaches that the cell door has always been open, but you were too busy decorating the walls of your identity to notice it. The discernment you acquired today is the tool to begin the deliberate dismantling of the machine. Do not expect immediate relief. The training of the conscious elite is arduous and demands a vigilance that most are not willing to sustain. But for those who seek true sovereign consciousness, there is no other path than the surgical destruction of illusion. This mental engineering protocol has been delivered, and your negligence no longer has excuses. You now have the lucidity necessary to see the gears grinding whenever frustration, anxiety, or desire arise in your hardware. However, knowing how the mechanism works does not free you. It only makes you responsible for your own slavery. The conscious elite does not consume content to learn something new, but to sharpen the tools of execution. Knowledge without rigor is just more processing trash accumulated in your system. Subscribe if you are ready to abandon victimhood and assume the role of operator of lucidity in your own life. This channel is a training center for those who do not seek comfortable mindfulness, but rather a direct confrontation with factual reality. Turn on notifications, as the gear of ignorance will try to close your blind spot again as soon as this screen goes dark. Be alert. The enemy is not out there. It is the automatic loop that you allow to run within yourself. Your next test will come with the next unpleasant sensation or the next impulse for consumption. Remember Gear 7. Observe, breathe, and do not provide the fuel of reactivity. The work of breaking ties with the mediocrity of the walking dead is continuous and demands absolute rigor. The workshop of the mind is open, and the corrupted code has been exposed. Now the execution and maintenance of your mental sovereignty are entirely your responsibility. The training begins now.